Welcome back, everyone, to The Deep Dive. We always love to really dig into the details of your requests, and today's no exception. You've been sending in some seriously fascinating questions about cannabinoids and psychedelics, and, well, the whole question of natural versus synthetic just seems to keep popping up.
It's a great area to explore. It seems like everyone's talking about these compounds, but there's a lot of confusion out there about what makes them tick.
Exactly. So we're going to try and sort through some of that today, focusing specifically on what makes those lab-created single-molecule compounds different from the more intricate natural extracts. You with me?
Absolutely. I think a lot of folks are really struggling with this because it gets pretty complex pretty quickly.
Yeah, no doubt. So before we get lost in the weeds, let's start with the basics. Can you break down, the fundamental difference between a synthetic single-molecule cannabinoid, or psychedelic for that matter, and a natural extract?
Sure, I think the simplest way to explain it is to think about the origin and the purity. When you're
Uh-huh.
talking about synthetics, you're talking about creating a single molecule in a lab. You're isolating that molecule, and you know exactly what you're getting. It's like baking a cake from scratch, you know? You control every ingredient.
So you're saying with synthetics, it's all about precision and control.
Exactly. You know exactly what you're putting in, and you can predict, more or less, how it's going to interact with the body.
Okay, that makes sense. But then how are extracts different? They come straight from the plant, right?
Right. And that's where things get a little more complicated, because when you extract from a plant, you're not just getting that single molecule, you're getting a whole symphony of compounds, cannabinoids, terpenes, flavonoids, the list goes on and on.
So it's like instead of just having one instrument, you have a whole orchestra playing at once.
Exactly. And each of those instruments is contributing to the overall sound, or in this case, the overall effect of the extract.
So it sounds like with extracts, you're dealing with a lot more, well, complexity.
Yeah, you could say that. And that complexity is what makes extracts so interesting, but also so challenging to understand.
Okay, I'm starting to see where this is going. But why are we so focused on isolating those single molecules in the first place? What's the advantage of that super controlled synthetic approach?
Well, as we touched on before, it really boils down to control. When you have a single molecule, you can measure dosages very precisely, you know exactly how much you're giving, and you can be more confident in predicting how it's going to work.
So it's like you're taking the guesswork out of the equation. Makes it more reliable, maybe?
Mhm.
Especially if you're thinking about using these compounds for, like, therapeutic purposes, right?
Absolutely. And that's a huge part of why there's so much interest in synthetic cannabinoids and psychedelics for things like, treating pain, anxiety, depression, a whole range of conditions.
Right, right. But I'm guessing that the research you've been doing has probably highlighted some of the unique challenges that come with those more complex extracts too, right? I mean, you were mentioning terms like residual complexity, batch variability, even cultivar stability, and polypharmacy.
Right.
Those sound pretty intense. Can you break those down for us a bit? Like, what makes working with those extracts so tricky?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's where we get into some of the really fascinating and sometimes frustrating aspects of working with these compounds. Let's start with residual complexity, because that's a big one. So residual complexity basically means that even with the most sophisticated extraction techniques, you can't completely isolate just one molecule from a plant. There are always going to be these tiny traces of other compounds hanging around. You know, it's like trying to separate every single grain of sand on a beach. You're bound to miss a few.
So even if you're, say, trying to extract pure CBD, there might be other cannabinoids or terpenes or who knows what else still in the mix, right? Each with their own little effect.
Exactly. It creates this kind of background hum, this complexity that can make it really difficult to pinpoint exactly how an extract is going to behave.
And I'm guessing that leads us right into, what was it? Batch variability.
You got it. See, even when you're extracting from the same plant, you can end up with extracts that have slightly different chemical makeups. And that's because of all sorts of things. The growing conditions, the extraction methods used, even a time of year the plant was harvested.
I see. So it's like, even if you use the same recipe to bake a cake, it might turn out a little different each time depending on your oven, the ingredients, maybe even the weather that day.
Perfect analogy. You're
Yeah.
getting it. And that's why it's so tough to standardize extracts, to guarantee that every batch is going to have the exact same effect.
Right, right. Makes sense. And then there's the whole cultivar stability thing too, right? Didn't you say that some plants are just genetically less stable than others?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one, especially when you're talking about plants that have been bred for super high levels of a specific compound like THC in cannabis, for instance. Those plants can be a bit finicky genetically. Even tiny variations in their genes can make a big difference in what you get in the final extract.
Oh, so even if you're working with, let's say, the same strain of cannabis, each batch could potentially have a slightly different chemical profile just because of those little genetic quirks.
It's tricky, right? And then to top it all off, we have polypharmacy, which is a whole other layer of complexity.
Polypharmacy, that one sounds like a mouthful.
It is, but it's actually a pretty simple concept. It basically means that you have multiple compounds all interacting with each other inside the body, and those interactions can be, well, they can be pretty unpredictable.
So, like one compound might boost the effects of another, or maybe even block them altogether?
Exactly. It's like a delicate dance, all these different partners swirling around. You never quite know how they're going to step on each other's toes,
Hmm.
and figuring out that choreography, well, let's just say it keeps us scientists busy.
Okay, wow. So we've got residual complexity, batch variability, cultivar stability, and now polypharmacy.
Hmm.
It sounds like navigating the world of extracts is like a full-time job.
Hmm?
But is there any way to like manage all this complexity, or are we just kind of at the mercy of these wild plants?
That is the million-dollar question, and the answer is, it's complicated, of course, but there are ways to wrangle some of this wildness to bring a bit more order to the chaos, and one of the most promising approaches is something called, are you ready for this? Quality by design, or, as we like to call it in the lab, QBD.
QBD, huh? Sounds kind of high-tech.
It is. In a nutshell, QBD is all about understanding and controlling the variability in extracts right from the get-go. So instead of crossing our fingers and hoping for the best, we're using a systematic, scientific approach to make sure that every batch is as consistent and predictable as possible.
So it's like instead of just kind of winging it, you're using like a super detailed blueprint to build each batch from the ground up.
You got it. And that blueprint takes into account everything we've been talking about. The plant genetics, the growing conditions, the extraction methods, even the packaging and storage. Every little detail matters.
That sounds incredibly meticulous. It must be like a ton of work.
It is. But it's worth it because it allows us to create extracts that are more reliable, more predictable, and ultimately more beneficial for the people who use them.
I can see that. So with QBD, you're basically bringing like a scientific level of precision to the art of extracting these compounds.
You could say that. It's like we're taking the best of both worlds. The power of nature combined with the rigor of science.
Okay, I'm really starting to get a feel for how QBD works. But how does it actually play out in practice? Like, what are some of the specific tools and techniques that you use to tame these wild extracts?
That's where the real fun begins. See, QBD is all about understanding those factors that contribute to variability, right? So we have to analyze everything, and I mean everything, from the plant's DNA to the soil it grows in, the temperature, the humidity, the extraction method.
Whoa. Okay, so we're talking about a pretty deep dive into like the whole ecosystem of the plant, right? Not just the plant itself.
Exactly. We need to map out the entire process, identify all those potential pitfalls and points where things could go off track. It's like a detective investigating a crime scene. We're looking for clues, trying to piece together the puzzle of how to create the most consistent and effective extract possible.
So it's not just about like tweaking a few things here and there. It's about having this super comprehensive understanding of the entire process from start to finish.
You got it. And once we have that map, that understanding, we can start putting in place these really robust controls at each stage. It might involve carefully choosing specific plant varieties or fine-tuning those growing conditions to minimize any fluctuations, or using cutting-edge extraction technology to make sure everything is super precise.
This is fascinating stuff. It's like you're taking the precision of a laboratory and applying it to the world of like agriculture and extraction.
That's a great way to put it. And to make sure we're actually hitting those targets we've set, we use a ton of advanced analytical techniques. It's like having this super powerful microscope that lets us zoom in and see the chemical makeup of the extract in incredible detail.
So you're not just relying on like intuition or guesswork. You're using hard data and science to guide every decision.
Oh, absolutely. These analytical tools, they let us identify and measure all the different compounds in the extract. We can make sure each batch is consistent, and we can flag any outliers that might be, a little off. It's like having a fingerprint for each batch, so we can track its quality and potency super accurately.
Wow, that's incredible. So you're really bringing together the power of nature with a rigor of science. But how does all of this tie back to, therapeutic development? How does QBD help us bridge the gap between these complex extracts and creating reliable and effective therapies?
Okay, so that's where things get really, really interesting. By using QBD, we can start to connect the dots between the complexity of those extracts and the need for clear, repeatable results in clinical research. It's all about laying a solid foundation for exploring how these compounds can be used to help people.
So instead of just kind of throwing a bunch of different extracts at a problem and hoping something sticks,
Yeah.
QBD allows you to like more targeted and controlled interventions.
Exactly. By understanding those specific chemical profiles and making sure that each batch is consistent, we can design clinical trials that are, more likely to give us meaningful results. And that leads to a better understanding of how different compounds interact with the body and hopefully to more personalized and effective therapies down the road.
It's like taking a shot in the dark and turning it into a carefully aimed arrow, right? Increasing your chances of hitting that target.
That's a fantastic analogy. And as we gather more data and we refine our understanding, we can actually tweak and optimize that production process even more. We can create extracts that are specifically tailored for certain therapeutic applications. It's really amazing stuff.
It sounds like it. So are there any examples of like where QBD is already making a difference in the field of, cannabinoids and psychedelics? Like, are there any success stories out there that really highlight its potential?
Absolutely. One great example is in the development of standardized cannabis extracts for treating chronic pain. By carefully selecting the right cultivars, optimizing those growing conditions, and really focusing on quality control, researchers have been able to create extracts with consistent levels of those key cannabinoids like THC and CBD.
So instead of people having these like wildly different experiences with different batches of, let's say, medical cannabis, they can now access a more standardized and predictable product. That must make a huge difference for patients.
It really does. It not only increases the chances of successfully managing that pain, but it also helps researchers study the effects of these compounds in a more well-controlled way. And that leads to a better understanding of how they actually work, which is, essential for developing new and better treatments.
This is incredible. It sounds like QBD is really paving the way for a more uh, sophisticated and evidence-based approach to using these compounds, both for cannabinoids and psychedelics, right?
It really is. And as this whole field keeps evolving, we can expect to see even more innovative uses of QBD, leading to even more personalized therapies that are specifically tailored to individual needs and biological profiles. That's where we're headed.
Okay, wow. That's pretty exciting stuff. But with all this focus on standardization and control, I can't help but wonder if we're like losing some of the magic, The serendipity that comes with working with nature. Are we over-engineering these compounds, stripping away their inherent complexity in this pursuit of scientific purity? It's something I've been thinking about a lot.
That's a fantastic question. And to be honest, it's something that's being debated a lot within the scientific community. There are definitely some folks who believe that by focusing so much on isolating and standardizing these compounds, we might be overlooking the synergistic effects of the whole plant, the what's called the entourage effect.
The entourage effect. What's that?
It's the idea that all the different compounds in a plant working together in harmony can create a more holistic and beneficial effect than any single compound could on its own.
So it's like comparing a single instrument to a full orchestra. You might love the sound of a solo violin, but the symphony with all those instruments playing together creates this richer, more layered experience.
Precisely. And there's a growing body of research exploring the potential benefits of those full spectrum extracts, suggesting that the entourage effect might be really important for some therapeutic applications.
So it sounds like there's this delicate balance to strike between harnessing scientific rigor and respecting the inherent complexity of the natural world. It's fascinating.
It really is. And I think regardless of where you stand on that debate, it's clear that QBD is playing a huge role in how we understand and use these compounds both now and in the future.
I agree with that. This whole deep dive has given me a much deeper understanding of how complex these compounds are and also how much potential they hold. It's like we've only just started to explore the tip of the iceberg.
I think you're right about that. There's so much more to learn, so much more to discover. It's a truly exciting time to be involved in this field.
Welcome back to the deep dive. I feel like we've just gone on this incredible journey through the world of cannabinoids and psychedelics. From those basic building blocks, those single molecules, all the way to those complex extracts, and even how QBD is bringing that scientific precision to the table. It's been quite a ride.
It has. And the most exciting part is we're really just getting started.
That's what I was thinking. I mean, where do we go from here? What's next for these incredible compounds? What does the future hold?
Oh, the future is wide open. We're on the edge of like a whole new era in medicine where these compounds could completely change how we approach, well, so many conditions. Chronic pain, mental health disorders, you name it.
It really does feel like there's so much potential. And one thing I keep seeing pop up in my research is this whole concept of personalized medicine. It seems like everyone's realizing that we all react to these compounds a little differently, and that one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't cut it.
You're absolutely right. Personalized medicine is like the next frontier in healthcare, and it's especially relevant when we're talking about these compounds. They interact with these incredibly complex systems in our bodies, and those systems are different for every single person. Our genes, our lifestyles, even the bacteria in our gut. It all affects how we respond.
So it's like trying to solve a puzzle where each person has their own unique set of pieces, right?
Perfect analogy. And as we learn more about those individual variations, we're realizing that tailoring treatments to each person's specific needs is crucial. It's about maximizing those benefits and minimizing any risks. It's about moving away from those broad strokes and really embracing those individual nuances.
It sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But I imagine actually personalizing these treatments comes with, with its own set of challenges, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest hurdles is figuring out how to reliably assess those individual differences. How do we predict how someone will respond to a certain compound or a specific dosage? That's a big one. And it means we have to identify biomarkers, things that can give us insights into, like, a person's endocannabinoid system or their sensitivity to certain psychedelics.
So we're talking about creating like a personalized roadmap for each patient, guiding them toward the most effective and safest treatment path for them.
Exactly. It's all about precision and really understanding the individual.
And that brings us back to the importance of research, doesn't it? We need those well-designed studies that actually take these differences into account.
Couldn't agree more. Solid research is the foundation for developing responsible therapies, especially when we're dealing with compounds that can have such, profound effects on the brain and body. We can't just rely on anecdotes anymore. We need that scientific rigor, that evidence-based approach.
Speaking of research, what areas are you most excited about right now? Where are scientists focusing their efforts? What's got you buzzing?
Well, one area that's really exploding right now is the use of psychedelics for treating mental health conditions. There's this huge resurgence of interest in compounds like psilocybin, MDMA, things like that for conditions like depression, anxiety, even PTSD.
I've been reading about that too. It seems like there's like a real shift happening in how we view those compounds. What's driving that?
I think there are a few things. First, people are realizing that traditional treatments for these conditions just don't work for everyone. They're looking for other options. And second, we're seeing some really promising results from early studies. They suggest that these compounds, when used in controlled settings, and especially when combined with therapy, can be incredibly effective.
So it's not just about like masking the symptoms, right?
Yeah.
It's about actually getting to the root of the problem and helping people heal on a deeper level.
That's exactly it. These compounds seem to open up this window, this heightened state of awareness and neuroplasticity where people can actually process trauma, explore their emotions, and develop new ways of coping and seeing the world.
It's like hitting the reset button on the brain,
Right.
Allowing for like profound growth and change. It's
Yeah.
Amazing. But I know there are still a lot of unknowns, a lot of challenges when it comes to using these compounds therapeutically.
Of course. We're still in the early stages of research, and we need to learn a lot more about the long-term effects, the safety, the efficacy, the whole 9 yards. And the regulatory landscape is, it's pretty complex, to say the least. But there's this growing movement to reevaluate the potential of these compounds and to create a responsible framework for research and clinical use.
Sounds like we're on the brink of a paradigm shift in how we think about mental health and well-being. It's exciting and, a little daunting too.
It is. It's a time of incredible possibility, but we have to be cautious. We have to be thoughtful. As we move forward, scientific rigor and ethical considerations have to be front and center.
Well said. This has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like I have a much deeper appreciation for these compounds now, for their complexity and for the amazing potential they hold. It's clear we've only just scratched the surface, and there's so much more to discover.
It's been my pleasure. I'm always thrilled to share my passion for this field. I hope this conversation has sparked your curiosity and given you a solid understanding of, well, all the nuances of cannabinoids and
It,
psychedelics.
it definitely has. And for everyone listening, please keep diving deep. Keep those curious minds engaged. There's a whole world waiting to be explored. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.